One.
Michelle Kommer, and my title is Labor Commissioner for the North Dakota Department of Labor and Human Rights and Executive Director of Job Service North Dakota.
You're both of those things?
I have two jobs.
Okay, so we hit the jackpot here because we get the Labor Commissioner. That's all I'm writing. I'm not continuing on with that rest. And then the Executive Director for
Job Service North Dakota.
Job Service North Dakota. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is this new study that came out that reflects what's going on in the oil patch, or it reflects what needs to be done out in the oil patch. And then we'll kind of offshoot from there, but just kind of an overview a little bit, not War and Peace, but maybe a little bit more than an elevator pitch. What's this study all about?
Sure. So what we have here is the result of many months of work of the Workforce Development Council, which is the council that's made up of 32 members, 21 from the private sector, diverse in terms of geography and industry, as well as representatives from organized labor. We have legislators on the council, we have elected officials from local government on the council, and we also have state agency partners on the council. And we've been working for a number of months, gathering information through studies, data, evidence, employer surveys, stakeholder interviews, as much information as we could consume to have a very deep and specific understanding of North Dakota's workforce needs. And what we have today, and we submitted it to Governor Burgum on October 24th, is a report of recommendations that is the result of all that work. I like to think of it as a conclusion in some ways of a chapter, but it's really just a milestone because, of course, what happens next is the important part of the story.
So is there a couple top themes, trends, something that stood out as far as what is needed for the workforce or what needs to be done or something like that?
Yeah, there sure is. So if we were to identify themes, which we have in the report, which can be located on the governor's website, there are 5 themes. And one of them is the technical skills gap, and I'd love to talk more about that if we have a chance. 2 is the need for youth engagement and earlier and more diverse career exploration at an earlier age. 3rd is the nursing and healthcare technician shortage in North Dakota. 4th, support for people with barriers to employment. We have North Dakotans that aren't working. While we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation and the highest labor market participation rates, we do have folks in North Dakota today that aren't working. And then 5th, it's a numbers game, it's math, and in some ways, we like math because it adds up or it doesn't. And in this case, we simply have more jobs in North Dakota than we have people. And that doesn't even touch on whether they have the skills needed to do the work. It's a numbers game. We don't have enough people here to do the jobs we have open today and that we project that we'll have open. So we need to have a strategy around that.
And one of the reasons why I think this is an important study and it relates to oil and gas is because oil and gas is I call them the kings of the economy. They have such a economic engine going that, in fact, they're the only industry to produce a net gain of jobs the last 10 years, the mining industry, which is what oil and gas is considered in. So when I hear the technical skills gap, when I hear the nursing healthcare shortage, these are things that are directly related to oil and gas. One Oak just donated, $1 million to help out the Watford City Hospital. That shows you how much oil and gas considers healthcare and nursing a need. What's been going on in the world of fracking is technical, and that world has changed. In fact, 5 years ago, we used to joke on this program and say, these guys aren't slinging chains anymore. These aren't the same oil field workers. I heard Ron Ness recently talk about how these are more office jobs now. You mentioned you met with Ron Ness, and that actually is one of the reasons why this report came to be. Or it was influenced, or Ron had an involvement with a different study, or
yeah. So of course,
tie in the oil and gas for me.
You bet. I mean, as you just described, we know that this industry employs today over 60,000 people, maybe close to 70,000, and we know that number is going to be significantly bigger in the future. We also know from working with members of that industry, including Ron, that, as you just pointed out, the jobs that are coming to North Dakota today, in contrast to 5 years ago, are jobs that bring permanent residents rather than transient residents. They're jobs that require technical skills that may support the idea that people bring their families here, which creates another set of challenges in terms of housing and education and infrastructure. And so, to the extent that we want to continue the growth and success of that industry in North Dakota, we have to be having this conversation. So it was absolutely a driver. But what we've learned over the last 11 months is that the oil and gas industry is not the only industry that's suffering for trained and talented workforce. And so it is a key issue for our state. It is a key issue, probably the number one issue for our continued economic success, and our failure to address it is going to have consequences.
Well, I look at the technical side and I see, okay, we've got a lot more remote sensors now, and we have a lot more algorithms and that sort of thing. And then we're going to get into the UAS part of life too, and that's going to be directly integrated into oil and gas on a number of different things, from surveillance to pipeline detection to just going up and checking on top of buildings to make sure things are there. So there's a lot of applications for it. But NDSU plays such a key role, North Dakota State University, in the technical side of things. Was that at all addressed in your studies? Is that talked about how, we've got one of the top universities for UAS, and they're gaining on energy algorithms, if you will. Is there a study or a plan or a discussion at all with NDSU and then also satisfying that workforce?
Well, what you'll find in the report is a pretty deep discussion about the technical skills gap. And what we mean when we say that is we very purposefully relanguaged what some people call a middle skills gap. You hear that across America, frankly. And we learned that was one of the initial challenges, right? Is what parent strives for their child to have a middle skills job? When in fact, the jobs that you just spoke of and the jobs that we're aware are available today and will be in the future are highly technical jobs. Mm-hmm. And what we looked at as part of this process is, what are the jobs today? What are they going to be tomorrow? Where in North Dakota do we have programs that satisfy those needs? Where are there gaps? And in general, what we learned from that is that you can't talk about workforce without talking about education. They're inextricably linked. And that's where the theme came up about needing to get into the school system earlier. And we're talking the K-12 system and exposing kids to what opportunities are available to them, helping them understand what their skills, strengths, gifts, talents, aspirations may be in the context of these jobs that are available. And then taking into consideration the today and the tomorrow. So I heard a statistic that 70% of kindergartners today will have jobs that don't exist today. So what are we doing to train them in terms of not a particular job, but to have skills that are translatable, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, systems thinking. And so to more directly answer your question, which I like to do, we didn't get into, what specific program is where and having, a significant impact or success, but rather more generally, how are we going to address this technical skills gap that exists today and make plans to support those programs, to build those programs, to acknowledge that they're an important part of the path forward.
Sounds like the way I interpreted that is that there's going to be a fleshing out of what the educational core is going to be, because how do you train somebody for a job that doesn't exist? Well, there's got to be some sort of similarity, some sort of core that exists within all the jobs, whether it's math, science, that the STEM. And STEM seems to be the direction right now that is where we landed on, that will allow kids to have an opportunity to go a lot of different directions. Mm-hmm. What was it? I was going to ask you about one of the things that we've been talking about on this program for probably 4 years now, maybe 5, is the 2-year degree and the 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. 4 or 5 years ago, I said, I don't think I'd want my kid to go to a 4-year school unless they were going to be an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, which I understand is an 8-year school, but unless it's a specialized profession that you want to go do, I don't know if I would do that. I would go get your CDL license. Go get your, artificial engineering training at the local tech school for a year and a half. It just seemed like there was a renaissance opportunity for trade. Is that a technical? Is that a health? That would be healthcare too?
That is,
because of registered nurses.
You bet it is.
Talk to me about your reaction to what I just told you about. As a parent,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want my kid going to a 4-year school unless he knows exactly what he wants to be.
You bet. Well, I'm smiling as I listen to you because that is directly addressed here.
Oh.
And I'm also smiling because we say kind of tongue in cheek, hey, all we need to do is change a 40-year-old paradigm that says that you have to go to get a 4-year degree to get a good job. And it's as much the parents, if not more, it's you and I, like you just said, as it is the kids and helping them be aware of what these opportunities are. And then it's recognizing the shift in the cost of education today versus 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. And that today, getting a general liberal arts degree can cause a student to incur, a fair amount of debt. And whereas a technical degree today, in many cases, you can have paid for by an employer who's really aching for workforce, right? So you graduate with a technical degree, and just to be clear, these can be in the trades, but they can also be in healthcare. Many, as we've learned through this process, are highly technical jobs. And you can graduate with no debt. You can walk out of school. And I've heard story after story, not just anecdotes, but real stories here in North Dakota where you graduate with no debt. You're age 20 and you're making $50,000, $60,000. Whereas with a 4-year general liberal arts degree, you may struggle to find that job, and you may struggle to make $30,000 a year. And you now have X amount of dollars in student debt. So we're not trying to encourage or discourage 4-year degrees. That's not the message here. But we do want to raise awareness for parents like you and I that there are the options, and we want to make that known to our students too. That the stereotype that has perpetuated in our entire country over the course of the last 40 years is no longer true. And to illustrate, in my mind, and I am not the creative type, I like data analytics, math, and science, but in my mind, I picture, a split screen, and let's call it a YouTube video, not TV. And on each side you have, on one side you have a young man who's standing in front of a nice house with a 3-car garage and nice car. Other side of the screen, young woman, same exact scenario, right? And you start flashing up on the screen, okay, so John went to get his 4-year degree, graduated with $45,000 in debt. Here's his mortgage payment, here's his house payment, here's his starting salary. You get in the red pretty quick. Then start adding up savings that you're not saving for your retirement because of that scenario. And on the other side, the young woman's, went to a tech school, has no debt, same house payment, same car payment. And then to cap it off, we watch him in our screen drive to his job in his suit and tie as a junior lender at a bank. And this is the paradigm that I have for my kids. Maybe you do too, maybe others do, right? And we watch her get in her car and drive to her job as a technician in a manufacturing plant, except the view blows up our stereotype of what that means. I've been to these plants, they're white and gleaming and clean. And she goes to work as a high-tech welder in a room that looks more like a mainframe. I'm aging myself, but let's call it a computer room. It looks more like NASA,
Right.
And that's the message that I think we really have to help our students receive. That's what we have to help our parents understand. I'm included in that. In the course of the last 11 months, I have 3 kids, a senior in high school, a junior in high school, and a 6th grader. And I was preparing to do a speech, the title of which was Good Jobs That Pay Without a BA. Only because it rhymed. I meant all bachelor's degrees. And my husband came into the den and he, what are you doing? I told him what I was doing. And he kind of smirked and he said, so you'd be all right with the girls going to a tech school? And it was the moment of truth, because at this point now I've done all this research. I understand the real life situation, the jobs available here, what they look like. I've been and visited many of these places where these jobs exist. And I gulped and I said, absolutely. But that would not have been true had I not been so deeply immersed in this work. And that's what we have to find a way to share with others.
Well, you said it right. It's a 40-year-old mindset
It
that
is.
needs to be changed. And I've had this conversation with multiple people over the past 5 years. The one that comes to mind is Brian Lash. He owned Target Logistics.
Oh, yeah.
They basically put housing out in the oil patch, temporary housing. They did the Olympics. Halliburton's a client of theirs. I mean, that sort of thing. And we would talk about how you're 20 years old, you're done with your education, you're making $50,000 to $70,000 a year. You're not adding more debt on like a college kid would. Like I know they banned the credit cards from the college campuses, or at least they tried. But think of how many people they go to college, they get a credit card, the bar tabs, the dinner's out, the McDonald's breakfast sandwich the next morning, you soak it all up. You put it all on your credit card, right?
Yeah.
And so not only do you have a student loan debt, but you have a credit card debt, or you have a lot more of that type of debt. But when you're 20 and you get all of a sudden you're making 50 to 75 as a diesel mechanic or a CDL license, whatever, you're in a world of responsibility. So you're not bringing on that ancillary debt. So we talk about that a little bit. But then we talk about, you know what, after 5 years, you got 50 to 100 grand saved up. Yes. Now you can go start a Subway. Yeah. Now you can go start your art project store that you wanted to start up, whatever your dream is. Yeah. And guess what? You always have a fallback.
Absolutely.
You have a fallback. Yeah. And so these are not only Brian Lash, but several other oil and gas executives, because they see it. Yeah. And their mindset has changed to where they would have, 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have said that. You would have said, no, I want you to get a 4-year degree, that sort of thing. And that actually would have been the right thing to say. Mm-hmm. But now there's options out there. And, the trades didn't have the opportunity that they had now. Yeah. I mean, artificial intelligence has changed the trades. And when you got energy using it and ag using it and healthcare using it and everybody seemed to use it, let's talk about that healthcare for a second.
Sure.
What did your study find that was needed for healthcare?
Sure. So we went into this knowing that there's been a nursing shortage for 25 years. So, had we come out of this and said, hey, there's a nursing shortage, we would have had a lot of people say, thanks, Captain Obvious. We knew that, right?
Right.
And we did. But
dentists too.
Yeah. But what's different about today's healthcare shortage is really two things, and it has to do with the generational shift. We've got a generation of, every profession, but it's hitting us hard in healthcare, of nurses retiring, but simultaneously we are becoming greater users of healthcare as the baby boomer generation gets older. So when you look at line graphs, you see that trend, and it's making this shortage all the more critical and acute. Not to mention it's particularly acute in rural North Dakota. So, but the one thing that we learned, we learned a lot of different things through this, but one thing that really stood out to us was that even if we solved the nursing shortage in North Dakota, you still can't keep your emergency room open or your critical care hospital open if you don't have x-ray technicians, if you don't have radiology technicians. Okay. And so the healthcare tech jobs really, that became evident to us, thanks to all the folks that were involved in this that we worked with and interviewed through this process. They said, don't forget this. Even if I solve this nursing problem, there are still these jobs. Well, and as you pointed out, this points straight back to the technical skills gap, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of those jobs are attainable with a 2-year degree. And there we found, to some extent, we compared the programs available in North Dakota to educate in the areas where we have shortages, and we do have some gaps there. And that's when, a level of detail that we got to get into, say, hey, there may be an opportunity here to have a program, to develop a program that meets this need. With my kids being the ages they are, I would love for someone to be talking to them in school about how there are these jobs open today. You will get one if you can enroll in this program and do well in the program, and you may even get an employer to sponsor you through this. In this process, I have learned that that person needs to be me, but that information today, we need to, as a system, as a North Dakota system, and it's one of our recommendations, is to figure out how we can integrate this connection, make this connection between the jobs that are available, the programs that are available to educate people to do those jobs, and how we make students And we don't even want to limit it to students, frankly. This is a situation where people can go back and get educated in these jobs if they're underemployed, if they want to try something different. But we have to draw that connection. We have to convene. And what I have found is that there's a great appetite to do that. I haven't run into a scenario where there's a reluctance to collaborate on this. I find great enthusiasm about collaborating on things like this, but it does take a structure to do that convening, and that's what this has really been all about.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that we did in the program a few weeks ago was we interviewed Patrick Bertinoli from Vera, who's now at MBI, but
he's on our council.
Okay, so great. So the Vera little thing that they have going on with introducing the CDL licenses to high school kids, I thought it was brilliant.
It is.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I would have been the first one to say, okay, does this pass are we bleeding private business into high school kids and that sort of thing? But that's not what this is about at all. This is about the CDL license and the opportunity that can come with that, and I really like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really smart. And we talked to Daniel Stenberg, and he said that if it goes well with this, they're trying to bring in other industries to the high schools and that sort of thing. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of high school seniors take tech classes at the local colleges and things like that. And this is where these changes are happening, and I don't think a lot of people realize it. And like you brought up earlier, there's this 40-year-old mindset that we have of education. And I see how the oil and gas industry has really changed and shattered a lot of that perception. Yeah. Talk to me, and we only got about 5 minutes left here, but talk to me about just what New Vera is doing and where you see that going with under your oversight as Labor Commission, Job Service North Dakota, because I would imagine you probably want to keep an eye on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the next step from here, of course, is to determine which of these recommendations should move forward into the execution stage. Some of them take no funding at all. They only take agreement. Some of them take funding. But to get back to your question, what Pat has done, and I admire Pat a great deal, he has taken a really innovative approach to his work for New Vera and now MBI. And he thinks about recruiting and retention so far beyond the traditional or conventional way that most people do. And I believe that he is actually really defining the future of what that needs to look like in North Dakota.
I agree.
And, he, like you pointed out in your example with the CDL, bringing that into the high school, he's gone so far as to introduce employees who are, I would say, at risk of not staying in North Dakota, maybe from somewhere else, came here for a job, not connected to the state. He's gone so far as to make community connections for those folks, and just some really innovative things. And I think that employers have to be willing to think about the conventional recruiting and retention really differently, like Pat is doing. Employers also have to be thinking about, you pointed this out earlier, taking a look into those job requirements and saying, do we really need a 4-year degree? Can we cut that out? It was true, and it remains true today, that if we want to, we can use the 4-year degree as a sorting mechanism. But in many cases, it does nothing to ensure that candidate is going to be better or worse at their job. So there are some states a little further out ahead of us in doing what we would call competency-based hiring, and throwing away all those traditional paradigms of even how we hire people, and think of how that's going to disrupt, kind of this system as we know it. But, the Workforce Development Council knows that this report is just a milestone, and we are all very interested in making sure that there's a mechanism that these recommendations get addressed and implemented. And private sector may have a lot to do with that. We hope that private sector does. We hope that oil and gas does, that we can partner with oil and gas. And I look to oil and gas as being, as you pointed out, the innovators, out ahead, willing to try new things and willing to invest. And that's going to be really important. And now I feel like we have a roadmap. I don't know that we have had a comprehensive roadmap in the past. I want to point out that this isn't a menu It's not where we want to order the French fries and the, deep fried pickles. The work that went into this resulted in a set of recommendations that are interoperable. So in the nursing section, for example, if you picked out 2 and said, yep, let's do these 2, you will not solve the nursing and healthcare technician shortage. You may make a dent. You may have picked the wrong 2 if you really wanted to make an impact. But how this was designed was to be interoperable. One affects the other. If we do this and this. And so I think it's a really important part of how this is read and how it moves ahead.
Quickly, because I know you've got a 1:30 here, I wanted to ask you about number 5. I wanted to make sure we talked about that, the need for new in-migration to North Dakota. And it's a complex topic. For one, Western North Dakota's infrastructure can't handle a lot of new in-migration. And they're working on it with the sewers and pipes, but a lot of those roads need to be redone because they were not built for anything more than a couple combines a year, and now you've got 40,000 trucks driving on them. So, and those are real issues, and they're being solved, and the investment has been done. So the in-migration, it's kind of a staggered thing that's happening, but there's competition like never before. North Dakota has its geographical challenges, it has its weather challenges, and there's like this race right now in the world of fracking because you can remotely frack. So Liberty Oil, for example, they got guys that go to work in San Antonio and then they go to their kids' soccer game at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, as opposed to working 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off like the old thing. So a lot of that's even changing. And North Dakota's investing a lot in quality of life, and they saw that, we got to make sure that we've got decent restaurants for people to go to. We got daycares for people. We have emergency services. And on the flip side, and I brought this up to Lynn Helms, I said, if these jobs, for lack of better words, don't get filled by, Americans, I see the nice man from Ghana taking this job, or the person from Sweden that always wanted to come to America and he's got the technical degree to do this, so Statoil moves him over here, whatever the heck is. There is a lot of competition like never before for the in-migration of certain things. Talk to me about that a little bit, and also with the study.
Yeah, you bet. Well, you just nailed it. I mean, and as we were talking about earlier, knowing what I know today versus a year ago, I sleep a lot less. And this is one of those points that is very challenging for us. Today, we have, less than 3% unemployment. Everybody knows the statistics. For the first time this summer, our country had more job openings than people available to do the work.
Wow.
We have more than half of the states with unemployment under 4%. 5 years ago, we had people coming to work in North Dakota that were leaving states that had 9% unemployment, 10% unemployment. That doesn't exist anymore. And as you just pointed out, I read about Oklahoma's oil activity and I thought, oh no, because we're competing for those workers. And on average, it's a lot warmer in Oklahoma, right? So the competition, to say it's stiff is an understatement. Our state is behind. When it comes to workforce strategies to address that. You can go to any state that borders us and find technical education programs that you can go to for free with, some differences amongst them. With retention pieces, you got to come to school here for free and work here for 3 years, and you'll have no loans to speak of. You don't even need to live in South Dakota to take advantage of that program in South Dakota. North Dakota kids can go there and go to school for free. But I look at the need for new North Dakotans is really 3 things. They all start with R, and one of them is retain students here, right? So keep people here that would have otherwise left. One is returning North Dakotans. Where, can we encourage people to come back to North Dakota? That's what I did. People that are, call myself a Gen Xer, when I graduated from high school here, in air quotes, everybody left. And then maybe 6-7 years later, people came back because, family was here and you want to settle down, have kids, enjoy our quality of life. But we have opportunity there to get people to come back to North Dakota. And then the third R is recruiting. And I think we would all agree that that's probably harder, right, to get people that are not from North Dakota to come here. But where I think we're doing some really good work, and where I think there is great investment and can continue to be additional investment, is this administration's Main Street initiative, right? Call it what you want, but it's about making attractive communities where people want to live and work. Attractive, affordable, and I think we have to pay attention to that, because I'm from a small town. I love where I grew up, and we have to be willing to invest in those communities to help our youth want to stay. And so it's not easy, it's complicated, but let me put that differently. I think with cooperation and coordination and recognition of what the challenges are, what we do great in North Dakota, what we do maybe better than anywhere, and what makes me excited about the job I have today and the potential, is our ability to cooperate and get these things done. And I'm really excited about what I think is a pretty solid roadmap for what we need to do. And I really do look forward to what comes next. And I look forward to working really closely with leaders in oil and gas. And so to the extent that this interview gets me that opportunity, I'll be really grateful. But no, I mean, we will start to reach out and make connections and saying, how can we partner? And talking about this report and saying, what do you think about this? What's your reaction? I mean, we engaged the industry through the council in building this, so I don't think anything in here will be a surprise. Right. But the next steps are, now what do we do? And how can we work together on this?
Well, I think oil and gas can embrace it, because this is what they've been preaching as long as I've been doing this.
Great.
To where I was, I thought it was kind of funny, because, I'm speaking your language. And I don't think you probably get that often, at least in the state, because of that 40-year-old mindset and just kind of the way things are. And, the other part about the oil and gas industry is it's an industry now. It's not a boom-bust cycle like it was before. I don't think people are quite understanding that. When you're producing 1 million barrels a day at $30 oil, that's not a boom-bust anymore. Yeah. It's an industry, and there is some layoffs and there is things that happen, but again, they were producing 1 million barrels a day when it was $30 oil. So some people stayed in business, and they still were producing those amount of barrels. And anyway, so just kind of summarize, kind of in conclusion, what do you want people to walk away from this study knowing, and what do you see next?
Yeah, well, the report is 19 pages long, but it's not all content. We've got some graphics and pictures. I want people to read the report.
That's a short report.
It really, really is.
Most of them are like 30 to 50 pages.
Yeah, it's really short. We call it a summary report because, of course, the devil's in the details, right? And we do have those details ready to share and talk about with people who want to talk about it. And so we want to take this from a summary report of recommendations to action plan. And so I want people to read the report, and I want people to identify what's most important to them, people, industries, business leaders, because it's going to take all of us, I guess, is the summary. I worked in the private sector for more than 20 years before I got this opportunity to serve the state that I love. And I didn't expect the government to solve my problems. And that's not what we're suggesting. We're suggesting that we've done some great work to identify a roadmap to move forward, but it's going to take all of us working together, convening on common interests, willing to invest in good ideas, which is the key here, right? Good strategic ideas. And that's what gets me really excited. We have a lot of potential here, and for what causes me to lose sleep, what keeps me enthusiastic and excited and really thrilled to be serving the state in this way, is that I believe what differentiates North Dakota is just that. It is our ability to rally around good ideas and get things done. And I'm excited to be a part of that.